Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. Over the last few years, really since about 2016, we have seen that movie studios and TV studios in particular, but entertainment in general, has become more and more hostile towards its audience. It's hard to put your finger on exactly why this is. There are undoubtedly a number of sources of this, ranging from philosophy to strains in the culture to the deeply embedded adversarial mindset of the average American. Regardless of the source, it is typical for storytellers and other creative minds to treat any kind of criticism, constructive or otherwise, from their audience as some kind of personal attack, as if they are engaged in a war over the entertainment they provide. This mindset is deeply unhealthy. Unfortunately, the typical opposite position that is taken is that the audience represents a customer who has to be respected in the same way a businessman represents a customer. This position is equally unhelpful. Let me explain why I think this is the case. We can very easily see the deeply unhealthy effect this has on storytelling in shows like She-Hulk. The entire construction of She-Hulk as a narrative sets up its own audience, or at least the critical part of that audience, as a villain. People on the internet who complain about the structure of the story and the characters they are presented with are in fact set up and knocked down as if they were the villain of the show, as if they were more dangerous than the use of the incredible physical power that She-Hulk possesses. Now, that might make sense if this storyline was couched in metaphor, if the technique used in telling this story were more skilled or more refined, if instead of simply presenting the writers as Jen and the audience is just a bunch of people on the internet talking about Jen in unflattering ways, if instead the audience had been portrayed as a kind of supervillain with mental powers, or the ability to overwhelm people with a bunch of stray thoughts, then you might actually have an interesting and engaging story that allows you to also examine the conflict between writer and audience. But since the writers were so caught up in this tension between writer and audience, and because they have apparently never taken meaningful criticism and used it to improve their work, all they can do is present us with this very lopsided, misshapen narrative. She-Hulk may be the most extreme example of this kind of antagonism between a storyteller and the audience. But we've seen it with almost every major media franchise of the last 5 years. We've seen it in Star Wars. We've seen it in Doctor Who. We've seen it in Star Trek. We've seen it many places in Marvel, and most recently we've seen it in the tension between Amazon's Rings of Power showrunners and their target audience. It is constant and it is unhealthy. As I've said before in my video on the nature of storytelling, a story requires both author and audience. The storyteller must tell their story with the goal of granting it to their audience such that they can then share it with others. Stories live in the telling. If the telling of the story injures the audience, then when they retell it, they will only injure themselves and their own audience. This creates a vicious spiral that leaves both audience and storyteller exhausted. I can't tell you how many people I've encountered who are just tired of their entertainment. They don't like it anymore. And yet there's no alternative for them, so people are left with nothing at all to do except complain about the constant attacks they are under. This provokes even more criticism, and the circle just turns over again. Now, the solution that is generally proposed is that the storyteller must treat the audience as if they are a customer. Market forces, we are told, are going to solve this problem for us. This is pure insanity. I have said before, market forces choose from the options available. However, storytellers must create something new. Every time a story goes before a new audience, it is in many ways a new story, even if the words and the expressions and the facts of the story are identical. The existence of pre-recorded stories have kind of hidden that reality from us. And believe me, I do intend to do another video on the topic of the transience of art at some point in the future. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I'm still working on collecting those thoughts. What's important right now is that we must understand that a customer buys a product. They are not a part of creating that product. When you are a part of the process, then you are not a customer, you are a partner. And believe me, in the act of storytelling, the audience is your partner. If you are writing a story in prose form, then the audience is doing all of the lighting, all of the shooting, all of the acting, all of the voice work, all of the sound effects for you. They are your partner in that part of the storytelling. If you've written and drawn a comic, they are still providing all of the voices and all of the sound effects for you. If you shoot a movie, they are creating the world in their mind. They are attempting to understand the characters' inner thoughts. They are doing that part of the storytelling for you. They are your partners in that storytelling endeavor. And it is the privilege of partners to criticize each other in an effort to make the work better. If audiences are ignoring important context to your story, it is okay to bring it up and make it known to the public. If authors are telling stories that are attacking their audience, it is fair for the audience to criticize that. But from the very beginning, when people told stories to each other in a circle around the campfire, that circle, that communal space, has been a shared endeavor between storyteller and audience. Both sides of the equation must once again come to respect the fact that we are in partnership with one another, that we must both work to maintain the story circle, that we cannot have stories until we are both active participants and collaborators in the artistic process. Right now, storytellers are using their position to try and control whether the audience can hear any stories at all. And the audience is trying to control storytellers strictly through economic forces. Neither of these things will restore the story circle. We cannot save storytelling until we once again join hands and recognize that while we can criticize one another, and while that will sometimes be uncomfortable, we cannot have stories unless storyteller and audience are on equal footing. At least that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you